Okay, very big welcome to the regular meeting of Pennine Ham, and a big welcome tonight to guests from Newport County Radio Club in Rhode Island, in the US. Very, very pleased to have the five of you join the club meeting tonight. The reason why, as a club, we invited you, or we didn't intend to invite all of you, that's down to Jim, KA1ZOU, because when Jim and I had a chat, Jim said, I think I'll invite the other guys that took part in our antenna shootout to come along as well. So really delighted to have you join us. As a radio club, Pennine Ham, although we have our meetings with speakers online like tonight, and we've got members in various parts of the world, including the US actually, who became members of Pennine Ham because they've enjoyed the talks we've had from all kinds of people across the amateur radio spectrum. One of the reasons that the club, I think, has been very successful is we've got a large number of members in our club who love working portable radio. They love going out either in a car, setting up somewhere. They love going out as I do with a rucksack on their back and an aerial in there and a radio, and spending several hours up in the hills. And we've got people as well, of course, who've not only do go out and run portable in the hills, they also log for parks on the air and also summits on the air as well. So a number of us have done both of those activities along with radio. And that's one of the great joys of amateur radio for me personally, is that, for example, when I go away on holidays, I will be in France in a few weeks' time, and we're going to two different campsites while we're out there. I'll set up a small antenna on both campsites. I'll tell you later what antenna I'm going to be using there, and play radio while I'm out there for a few hours when the family permit and other activities don't get in the way, just to spend a bit of time doing that. Because I think one of the joys we've got out of our hobby is not being able to just do it at home, but to put stuff in the back of the car or put stuff into a bag and walk it up somewhere and play outdoors with it. That just gives me immense pleasure, and many members of our club immense pleasure. One of the things we try and do as a club, by the way, and this is for you guys in Newport County, is that we've got a WhatsApp group, a mobile phone link up between club members who want to join that, where people write up their activations on there. So Ken, for example, one of our club officers, G4VZV, spends a lot of time out in Alicante operating portable from the salt lagoons with his radio on a trolley and a pole with a wire running up it for his antenna. And because of the location, he works incredible DX into the South Pacific, but also across the US as well, because of the fantastic advantage of propagation operating portable next to the sea, and particularly running portable a bit closer to the equator as well. So southern Spain is closer to the equator, and he just has a magnificent time out there. I'm sure Ken will come in later and just tell you a few words about that, about what he gets up to there. But we all enjoy portable operating, and I'm the club chair at Pennine Ham here. And one of the ways that I get people to come along and talk to our club about what they've been up to is when I read what you're doing in other radio magazines. So I'm an ARRL member, so I read QST. I've read it for many, many years. I'm also an RSGB member, so I get our magazine, which is called Ragcom, which isn't available commercially other than to RSGB members. And we've got another radio magazine in the UK, Practical Wireless. And of course, for many years, I also used to get CQ magazine, which sadly seems to have died, unfortunately, in the States. But we had some others in the UK, like Shortwave magazine, Ham Radio Today, that's Wireless World, that have all gone the way of many things as life moves on. But what I do is I look through the magazines and look for interesting subjects that could form the basis of a great talk or presentation. And when I saw the article that you guys in Newport County had put in the magazine about what you called an antenna shootout, and you can tell us about that in a minute, which was about putting antennas up portably in a portable location and comparing them. I thought what a great idea that was, and what great fun that was, and how interesting it would be to hear from you. So that's why we invited you along. So Jim, I'm going to start with you really. Just hand the microphone over to you, just to say a few words about yourself and about Newport County, and then talk to us about what you did in your antenna shootout.
Very good, Nick. And thank you very much for inviting us to be here. We feel very honored to be part of this. It was a good time, and we're going to tell you all about it. The idea was created by a sixth person who was unable to join us at this time, John Mills, and his antenna was I'm going to move to the side, the background that you can see there is the area where we were set up. And you can see there's a V-shaped thing in the background there. That's a apex down in V antenna. And he built that based on something that he had seen in a magazine. The advantage of that thing is that it doesn't require the car for a ground plane. The disadvantage is that it was cumbersome to erect and take down. The time involved, he felt, would disqualified it for him as a portable antenna. But it points out two things as we go around and describe our various antennas. You could almost say there's two classes, those that are independent of a vehicle and those that are not. So the vertical that you can see on the red truck, that's Mike's, and he'll tell you all about it, was by far the easiest antenna to set up, took the least amount of time, and equally easy to take down. I chose to put together an end-fed This is a commercially available fishing pole. It's about 1 meter long, collapsed, and just shy of 6 meters long when it's fully erected. And that in turn holds up a single wire. I don't know if you call these the same as we do. This is a chalk line dispenser. It has a crank on the side here, and normally a chalk line would come out. But what I did was take the string out and put a piece of 19 gauge antenna wire in it. But the advantage is with a crank, it's easy to retrieve, even if you've got an 80-meter length of it out there. That terminates in a 49-to-1 balun with got a little pigtail on here. You don't want this directly on the ground, so it's up off the ground. And in order to put this up, I usually pound a piece of reinforcing rod about 1 meter long into the ground a little bit, and then lash that fishing pole to it to hold up the far end of the end-fed wire. And it works pretty well. It did as well, generally speaking, as all the other antennas. And again, it does not require being attached to a car. So if you're going into some place where the car can't go, this is one choice. So a little background in the picture you can see behind me. This is the East Passage of Narragansett Bay, which comes up into the state of Rhode Island, the smallest of the U.S. states. And the Newport County Radio Club is on I'll say the main island in the bay, Aquidneck Island. But our club encompasses most of Rhode Island. There are other radio clubs at the northern end, but we run to the west and to the east of the lower end, the southern end of the state. So with that, I will hand this over to who would like to go next. Willie, you up?
You have to unmute, Willie. You're on mute.
Sure. I was wondering if it might be good to give the basic outline of how we were going to evaluate this shootout. I wonder if Bob might talk about, how we were going to evaluate how well each antenna did, because it kind of gives you an idea of why and how we set up the set up the whole shootout, and how we evaluated the results.
I think that's a good idea. Bob, you up for that?
Sure, sure. Glad to do it. Hi, everybody. I'm Bob. I'm WB4SON. Let's see, I was first licensed in 1970, so that was 55 years ago. And oh boy, there isn't a whole lot in ham radio that I haven't done. I think the one holdout is I've never made any EME contacts, Earth, Moon, Earth. But other than that, pretty much everything I've done. Um, Personally, I find POTA to be pretty intriguing. As I'm getting older in age, I suspect that one of these days I'll be moving into a townhouse or something like that where antennas would be restricted, and wasn't looking forward to that because ham radio is a pretty big part of my life. But one of the nice discoveries about parks on the air is I can get in my car, run out someplace, and put a park on the air and still have radio fun. So, and my big thing is education. Rhode Island, as Jim mentioned, is the smallest state in the United States. We've got about 1 million people in it. And there are roughly about 2,000 licensed radio amateurs. And I've taught licensing classes for just about a quarter of those in the last decade plus. So that's my big thing. I like education. But anyway, enough about me. Let's talk about the idea of the shootout. As Jim mentioned, another fellow K1JSM, John, had kind of come up with the concept as a way of getting some of our newer members active and on the air. This would have been back in July of 2023, I think. So we're kind of coming out of COVID at that point, but we're trying to get some folks on the air, in particular to show them that HF doesn't have to be as daunting as it might initially appear to be. So, and I think John came up with a pretty good plan. You can blame me for all the math and measurements. The basic concept was that we would set up radios 100 watts on CW. They would send an identical message, which was CQ test, CQ test, then their call sign twice at 25 words per minute. So that kind of equalized everybody's emission, and we'd use the reverse beacon network to be our judge. So we picked up the spots off of the RBN, and through some little math wizardry here, we converted the logarithmic scale into linear when we multiplied the distance times the signal to noise ratio on the thing in a linear fashion, and just came up with a way that we could kind of get an idea for how many people were being picked up on the reverse beacon network. So how many spots and how strong the stations were. Um, Everybody would transmit at the same time. So the idea was that we had all programmed memories into our radios. An air horn was sounded. People would push a button on their radio. It would send the same message out. And then we'd wait about 10 seconds and we would send it a second time. And we assigned a 5 kilohertz spectrum space for each one of the participants. So they would find some hole that would be there, within their 5 kilohertz spot on Morse code and send it. And all the spots were collected. They were all summed up. In the end, what struck me was how similar things were. There are some variants you can see in the article, but all of the antennas worked. And I think it might have been Rob who said, K1, KB1ZZU, who said the best antenna to use is the one you've got. And that's certainly true. And I had a friend of mine who's a silent key at this point, but for many Christmases, we would attach our transmitters to our Christmas trees. So our transmitters would be driving the lights on the Christmas tree, and we would have Morse code contacts via Christmas tree. again, proving that almost anything radiates, right? Even a wet noodle shoved in the back of your radio, you're going to get somewhere. It just might not be where you want. So that was a big takeaway, that all these antennas worked pretty well. I think the second takeaway was it depends on what you're looking at, right? So you could say maybe your criteria would be to have the largest number of spots. So this might be the biggest potential for people to work, and in which case Willie's antenna, I think, was the one that had the largest number of spots. You might be interested in how quickly you could get an antenna up in the air. That was certainly my criteria. I think I actually had the easiest antenna to put up. It's a ham stick, which this was a clone made by MFJ. It's a base loaded 4-foot fiberglass section on the bottom, 4-foot whip on the top, and it was resonant on 20 meters. So I basically, all I had to do was screw 2 pieces of the antenna onto a mag mount, slap it on my roof, and I was on the air. So that might be one of the criteria you have. So a bunch of different ways to look at it, but I had a lot of fun doing it, and so that was probably my biggest takeaway. But use the radio you've got, get on the air, and enjoy it. So that's my pitch, and I guess I'll turn it back over to Willie.
Good. Yeah, I think that explains, how we were going to evaluate how well the antennas worked. And as Bob says, a lot of different parameters could be taken in there. My antenna took the longest time to put up. When I first heard about this thing, I wanted to win this contest. So I said, what antenna do I think would be most efficient on 20 meters? And the other things that I wanted to do was I wanted to build it out of junk box parts, and I wanted to have it a no-cost antenna. Now, normally on my mobile operations, I use a random, well, it's not random length, it's an 85-foot wire that I end fed in an inverted V situation, and the center post is one of those push-up kite flying poles with a drive-on base. It takes a little while to set that up, probably 10 or 15 minutes. But that antenna I can use on 160 through 6 with the tuner that's in my K3. I usually operate in my van. I got it all set up. I was following along with my wife while she was hiking the Appalachian Trail. And so I was trying to operate all the parks that I could from Georgia up to Maine, although we ended up only making it up into mid-Vermont. Anyway, so because I wanted to win the thing, I wanted a resonant antenna that wouldn't have much loss to it, and that I didn't have to worry about kind of an unknown ground plane or stringing wires all over the parking lot. So, and I've always thought that I'd like to try an inverted dipole. I'm sorry, a vertical dipole rather. And I happen to have a 20-meter dipole sitting in the parts box, and it was a very interesting piece of an antenna that we built for field day at one time. We built a 40-meter Moxon, which was about 75 feet long, and we hung a 2-element 20-meter wire antenna inside that Moxon for our field day. So we had 2 gain antennas that were somewhat easy to put up in the field. Anyway, we eventually put up tri-banders. So I took that dipole and I said, okay, I'm going to make this dipole. I'm going to hang it vertically on my kite flying pole. But my kite flying pole wasn't quite long enough. So I took one of the vertical stingers out of the end of, one of the MFJ or one of the, the portable, 6-foot long antennas, the ham sticks, whatever. And I taped that up onto the top of the kite flying pole and hooked my dipole to that so I could get enough length. I found that I could run the coax 90 degrees to it out over the luggage rack and bring it back into the van. And if I took the very bottom leg of the dipole and moved it in and out a little bit, I could adjust the SWR to get it right at 1-to-1 without using an antenna tuner at all. So that's the antenna that I put up, and it did work as a DX antenna. I'm not sure, and I don't think I'd want to use that as my normal parks on the air antenna, or lighthouses or islands, or any of the other things that we normally do as portable operation, because you kind of lose with that low takeoff angle. I think you lose a lot of local contacts, which probably are important. But anyway, that's what I built. And I would say that if I were going to do it over again, I probably wouldn't use about a 35-year-old, 40-year-old piece of coax feeding that dipole, because I tried to eliminate all the losses that I could, and I think I introduced one in by using an ancient piece of coax to feed that thing, because my signals were not anywhere close to being as strong as AA1XQ's signal reports. So anyway, that's what I did. That's why I did it, and it was fun to do. And this next weekend, I think we've got the whole group getting together again, and we're going to set up at the same place. And we've invited all of our new members and technicians and people that don't have a lot of HF experience to come out and see the antenna shootout and see all the different ways that we can get on the air in a portable manner. So there's my windy presentation.
Thank you, Willie. Rob, KB1ZZU, do you want to give us your version?
Yes, Rob, KB1ZZU. Been a licensed ham now for about 15 years. I took one of the first, if not the first, licensing class given by Bob, WB4SON. So work a lot of parks on the air. I would like to work summits on the air, but the group that I hike with doesn't have the patience to stay on any peak for an extended amount of time to let me operate. So I've dragged the dead weight around on several hikes, but not actually operated. So for this particular event, I actually read the rules incorrectly. I thought we were going to be doing a multi-band competition. So my idea was to bring a multi-band antenna that was easy setup to get on the air to begin with, and then absolutely no setup to switch bands. So the antenna I used was, it's an Alpha Antenna ProMaster. It has a 17-foot vertical and a 25-foot horizontal radiator, an 8-foot ground stake. It mounts on a 6-foot tripod, and undoubtedly uses the coax from the feed line as the counterpoise. So that's my typical day at the park setup. Goes up real easy, 5 minutes tops. And after this this competition, and the base loaded vertical did so well, I went out and bought a Yaesu ATAS 125 that integrates nicely with my FT991 Alpha. And so I get on the air instantly now for the POTAs for a quick setup and quick exit. So that's my story. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Rob. And we've also got online tonight Mike, AA1XQ. Mike, do you want to tell us what you did? Mike's on mute.
Sorry, guys, trying to get off here, and I'll apologize too. Lawnmowers are running in my neighborhood, so I'm sorry about the QRM. It's quite annoying, actually. It started just as soon as I logged into the Zoom, of course. So anyway, I used a Wolf River coil to go ahead and compete in this shootout. And it's the mini coil, and it's got a 17-foot whip. And I mounted it with a Hustler mag mount with 8 foot of coax that I ran into the rig, into the truck. Mine is the red truck that you see behind Jim there, and you can see the coil sitting on top of the mag mount. So to my surprise, it seemed to work as well or better than any of the other antennas that people were using, and it went together very, very quickly. And that's really what I'm looking for, or was looking for, is an antenna that's easy to deploy and easy to take down. And so this Wolf River coil fits that bill. And the downside to it, mounted on top of the truck the way that you see it there, is that to change bands, you got to go and retrieve the antenna from the top of the truck and adjust the tap point on the coil and perhaps the length of the whip. But you know, I probably spent an hour in my driveway and figuring out, okay, what I had to do to tune it on 80, 40, 20, 15 is finicky, but it can be done. And so it gets out quite well. And with this particular setup, you also are provided with a tripod. I've tried the tripod on several occasions with 3 radials deployed off of it, and it doesn't work anywhere near as well as in the ground plane configuration. So that's what I tend to stick with. So, and that's what I used with good results for this antenna shootout. As far as my interests in ham radio, I've been on the air since 2001, and I'm mostly a digital op. My dad was a ham, and toward the end of his ham life, somehow he got interested in digital ham radio. So I picked up on that and got interested myself. And so that's where I got interested in the hobby. Over.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Mike. That's very interesting indeed. So in a second, I'm just going to get one of you to tell me what we say over here, what they say on the TV shows when they run these TV shows, the scores on the door. So of the scores that you took of these different antennas, just run through. Bob, I think you were the mathematician on this one. You were the one looking at
Nick, may I interrupt, please?
Yes, go ahead, Jim. Yeah, go on.
I wanted to add something to what Mike was telling the gathering about his antenna. I was so impressed by the performance, and it was so much easier to deal with than the end-fed, that I bought a duplicate of his setup, the same mag mount, the same mini coil, and the same 17-foot vertical. The downside of that tall vertical is that it's sensitive to the wind. And if the wind were to topple it over, when it hit the ground, it might very well kink it. And so I took the collapsed vertical to the hardware store and rummaged around the bins until I found a brass washer that would slide over everything except the last 3 sections. And I drilled 4 holes in that washer and attached lanyards to it that run off to the side. And so they actually form 4 guys to support the vertical. And I pass that on to everybody as a way of managing a tall vertical so it doesn't capsize. The other thing I did was I used to have a trans match that I would carry along, and I swapped that out from my antenna analyzer, and I put a small folding step stool in the car, so that, as Mike was saying, it's difficult to adjust that coil when it's on top of the car. But if you got a step stool and the antenna analyzer in your hand, it's zip, zip, and done. So pass those on as hints.
And one thing that I might mention is that basically, although Rob read the rules wrong, we were trying to build a single band antenna. So if we were trying to do multi-band antennas, it'd probably look totally different. But as a 20-meter antenna was kind of where our focus was for this particular event. I guess Bob wants to talk about how we scored.
Okay, I'll do that. And actually, I've changed from using ham sticks to the 17-foot long whip. When I do POTA, typically I'm either on 20 meters or 17. And so that 17-foot whip is, well, 17 feet's resonant on 20. And you fold in a couple of sections and make it 14-foot antenna, and it's resonant on the 18-meter band. So I too have become addicted to that. But like Jim says, it will blow down fairly easily. So if there's anything other than a light breeze, I go back to the ham sticks. All right. Well, this is always the boring part, but this is where the rubber met the road. AA1XQ, Mike, who was describing his Wolf River system, he had the coil on the bottom, which you really don't need on 20 meters, but he had that, and then the 17-foot whip. He had a score of in excess of 6 million points. Now, the score was a linear version of the signal strength times the distance and times the number of spots kind of thing. So he came out with a score a little bit over 6 million, had 48 contacts or people that picked him up on the spotting network, and was tied for second place for the longest DX distance. Willie, with his vertical dipole, had 3,500 or 3.5 million, sorry, points, but the largest number of spots. So he had 53 spots, and he also had the longest distance when 3,500. But as you can tell, the big difference in the score, the point value, had to do with the signal strength. Willie was being heard by a lot of stations, but with, relatively speaking, lower signal strength settings with his vertical dipole. So that's really the difference between the two. I came in third place using that 8-foot long ham stick, base loaded ham stick, with 2.3 million. I had 41 spots, so you can see the number of spots have reduced a little bit. Let's see, Jim, with his inverted V, right, Jim?
End-fed.
Oh, okay, end-fed. His end-fed was 1.8 million with 30 spots. John Mills, who isn't here with the Delta loop that he had, was 1.5 million with 36 spots. And Rob, who used a multi-band antenna, KB1ZZU, had 750,000 points with 40 spots. So the scores, the thing I looked at more than anything, if you're in POTA, you really don't care how well you're being heard. You hope that you're being heard well, but that's not the big thing. It's the number of people you can talk to. And those stations were pretty tightly coupled, right? So from the low 50s into the 30s kind of thing. So it was, it again, as Rob had said, use the antenna you got. That's the best antenna that you have there. Although, like I say, I'm guilty. I went to the 17-foot resonant radiator for mine and enjoyed a lot better performance. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, Bob, I think what your club ended up doing is what we do virtually at every one of our meetings. So we have an online meeting here once a week or once every 2 weeks, and afterwards, when we've kind of finished, presentations and we've shut down the recording, we just chat between ourselves. And I can guarantee to you, every week someone will come along with, I've just been building a new antenna to use portable, and this is what it is, and this is how I set it up, and this is how it's working. And one of the antennas, so it's a shame John's not here, but one of the antennas that a number of us have now built copies of is a portable delta loop that featured in an article in QST by Hiroki AH6CY. And we had Hiroki come to our club a month or so ago, a couple of months ago, to give a talk about that portable, what he described as a portable delta loop antenna, and the make of it. And I'm not the only person, Bob. I think you said in introducing the talk earlier, that the problem with that delta loop is if you're looking at a 20-meter delta loop, it's huge, and very, very difficult to put up in a portable scenario. So I said to myself, I'm going to make a 10-meter version of this, much smaller, but just to operate on 10 meters. And the other thing is, you just mentioned there that 17-foot whip. The MFJ, of course, used to sell the 17-foot steel telescopic whip. We've now discovered the delights of buying from AliExpress. They sell their own version of a 5.5 meter, 17-foot telescopic steel whip. It is now ridiculously cheap. £10 we're paying in the UK with free shipping for that AliExpress vertical. I bought 3 of them. I know other people in the club here have got more than that to do various things with. So I've got 2 I'm using in a delta loop with a piece of wire attached with crocodile clips at the top to hold the 2 elements together, and been playing with that. So we're all, it's interesting that we kind of end up doing similar things. So that 17-foot pole, a number of us have ended up with a coil at the bottom, an adjustable coil at the bottom. There are now various people that make them. There's some guys in Australia, I think they're called Mad Dog, that make what they call a Mad Dog coil, which is like the Wolf River coil, available in the US. AliExpress do their own version of it. I made my own one with about 20 taps on it, which I found utterly infuriating, and ditched for one of the commercial ones that you could just slide the connector up the coil up and down, so you can make that change of band that you were talking about very quickly. But a number of us have ended up with that as the portable antenna in the ground, on a stake, supported literally just a foot off the ground, no counterpoises, but radials, probably 3 meter, 10, 11 foot long, 12 foot long pieces of wire, just 4 of them thrown out as radials and tuned against that. And I can say to you, I mean, I was doing Parks on the Air last year in the hills just behind where I live here. So if you look at the picture behind me, that's actually where I live here. And literally up on one of the hills here, about 15-minute walk from the house, I put up that very vertical with the same sliding coil that you're talking about, similar to the Wolf River coil. I was calling CQ on 20 meters. I was working a bunch of European stations. I had some US and Canadian stations call me as well in the afternoon on 20 meters. And then out of nothing, I suddenly heard this station, and it was Kilo Lima 7. I can't remember his call sign now, but he was in Alaska. And I had to double take. I thought, goodness me, I'm running, I think at the time I was running 5 watts into this vertical piece of steel pole with these 4 random radials on the ground, and I'm being received in Alaska and given 5 and 6 or 5 and 7 by this guy in Alaska. So that's the wonder of radio, isn't it? But it does, one of the things we're all looking for here in our club is trying to find out, a bit like you really, which is the best antenna to use. And of course, I think Jim said it, or Willie said it earlier, the best antenna to use is the one that you enjoy using and works for you. That's the one to use. That's definitely the case. But Ken, G4VZV, who goes out operating portable in Spain. Do you just want to, Ken, just give these guys a bit of a talk about about what you use when you're operating out in Spain, in Alicante.
Yeah, okay, good evening, guys. Yeah, well, I do a lot of operating, like Nick says, by the salt lagoons, by the salt water of the sea, Mediterranean. And while I'm doing that, I'll use vertical polarization to get the low angle off the sea, off the salt water. The ionized, I'll say this generally, the ionized layers of the sodium that's in the salt and everything else, it almost attracts the RF and it just skims off the surface of the water. So you get very low angle takeoff, and I think the best antenna undoubtedly is a quarter wave vertical, not the half wave vertical. I think the quarter wave, and then you get the reflection from the salt water as the other half. So in effect, it is a vertical dipole. I position myself very close to the water's edge. If you can get in the what's called the Fresnel zone, maybe up to 2 or 3 wavelengths away, that's the maximum. If you go any further than that, you'll lose the benefit of the salt water. But definitely quarter wave verticals. I've heard of 1 or 2 with radials that throw the radials into the salt water itself, hoping that it will enhance their signal. But my experience is that it does not. I've heard 1 or 2, including a very well-known DXer from Australia, VK3 Yankee Echo, I think. He says he's tried it and he notices that there is a slight drop in noise level. I have to say my noise level is 0. And I mean that nearly every time I go out. If it's bad, it's S2. Whereas I can be sat at home and it can be S5, S6. So, yeah, if you're going to go out portable, I did make a couple of notes. I think here in the UK, and I'm sure it's the same in the USA, the weather plays a big part on you doing your portable, polter, soda, whatever. I mean, I started recently using my car in Spain, and I take the car into the salt lagoons in the evening, and I realized that either I'm going to get bitten outside with the mosquitoes in this very still water, or I sit in the car and I don't get bitten. It's coming up to that time of the year now where you can't sit in the car because it's too hot. That's by day and night. So you're better outside. Hopefully the mosquito season will have ended. And better outside because you've still got the relative warmth of the Mediterranean without the mosquitoes. So it all depends on time of year. The weather is important. I mean, in the UK, it rains more than I've ever known. I'm just fed up with the weather here at times. If it's not raining, it's windy. So you've got to be careful. I heard someone say, that these 17-foot telescopic whips subject to windy weather. Yeah, absolutely. You need a good magnet on top of the car, that's for sure. When I go out in Spain, and if I go out here in the UK, again, I have to look at the wind speed just to be on the safe side. Although I like the idea of guying it, sort of 5 or 6 foot up. And the only other point I made a note of is, I know some of you were using, one guy here was using that antenna that goes up. I think it's 17 feet and horizontal 25 feet. I've seen that one, a commercial antenna with the ground spike. Again, if I was going to go polter on 40 meters for simplicity, an inverted V or something horizontal will get good results because you're looking for NVIS type work rather than DX. So I would say, what band are you going to operate on? And if you can get near the sea, use vertical. If not, consider horizontal, especially for 40 and 80 meters. If you're going to go to the other bands between 10 and say 20 meters, I think a whip on top of the car is fantastic. And I like the idea of the one that is the screwdriver that's electric. That sounded good as well. So it all depends. It's a little bit of a thinking game, isn't it? When you go out doing poker or portable, you need to think about these other elements. I better pass it back to you, Nick.
Thank you very much, Ken. Anyone else wants to comment from Newport County before I just kind of throw it open to the meeting? I'm sure we've got members here got some questions to you guys, but any of you want to come back to start with? You're on mute, Willie.
One interesting concept that we have that's kind of in progress is it's pretty easy to to compare portable antennas. One of the things that I've been working on trying to figure out how we're going to set it up is compare full length, like 80-meter multi-band dipoles. And so we have a way that we have a bunch of towers that we put up for field day. So we could actually employ end to end to end to end a number of long dipoles and do this same kind of thing. So we're not too close there, but it is an interesting concept to do another kind of comparison of antennas without having, a real antenna survey facility, with sophisticated equipment. But I do think that either a Whisper or RBN is a really good thing that's right there for free that people can do testing with. So,
yeah, I totally agree with you, Willie. And even for people who don't operate CW or aren't confident to use CW, most of the modern transceivers have got built into them keyers, so you can edit your own call sign and CQ and so on into that. Press the button and it will do that for you, and then look at the RBN to see what results you're getting. I totally agree. It's a fantastic way of analysing in real time how good an antenna is. But amongst our members in Pennine Ham, anyone got a question or comment they want to put to any of the guys out there in Newport County? You've all gone quiet now because you all spend hours playing with these antennas.
Well, I'll say something then, Nick.
Yeah, go ahead, Martin. Good to see you.
Yeah, first off, I apologise, guys, for being late on parade. I couldn't get linked in. In fairness, I'm not a big HF operator, but I do parks on the air, and I have found mobile whips on the top of the car very, very useful, especially when you're operating on your own. I prefer to go out with somebody, but if I've got to operate on my own, I don't want to go somewhere obscure where I've got lots of stuff out, just in case there's a problem. But it's a great idea. Great what you're doing, guys. And I apologise profusely that I was late joining tonight. So keep up the good work, I'd say. Back to you, Nick.
Yeah, thank you very much, Martin. No need ever to apologise, of course, but thanks for your comments there. Can I just put on the spot our two members in Northern Germany, Mike and Adriana? I know the two of you have spent many hours working portable and playing with different antennas. What's your kind of conclusion that you two have come to?
Yes, we mostly taken out our car and a whip on top of the car, and sometimes with a coil, if the wind is too strong here in Northern Germany, we often have quite strong winds, and then 5-meter antennas on top of the car with the mag mounts are quite a problem. But the shortened ones with a coil work quite well. And so inside the house, we are using, we like to use the end-fed antennas, end-fed half-wave, as you did use. But for portable use, here, yes, we have tried it sometimes, but then we need a pole outside the car and connect it to the pole, and this is often a little bit more complicated. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, it's correct. And Adriana built a Rogakov antenna, which is a multi-band vertical. And we got a very short one. It's only about 5 meters long. It requests only, requires only 3 radials. Each is about 10 feet long, I think. And you put it on the ground, and actually we've had very good results with it. Even worked New Zealand and CW with 80 watts from it. And are very confident that this is an antenna which is very good suited for our conditions here, living in a serial house, having a lawn behind the house, which is the size of only, I think, 5 meters by 5 meters or something like that. And so not much room for putting up antennas, having to do with compromises. But nevertheless, this also works, and we are very satisfied with it. Otherwise, we like going portable outdoors, and even take our handhelds, mainly KX2, with us, doing QRP, and working there with especially the AX1 from Elecraft. It's about 4 feet long antenna with a coil, and it really is excellent. It's quite expensive, but nevertheless, it works very well. We've had with a 10 watts SSB from the KX2 and this short whip antenna contacts into Brazil, contacts into the US, and that was very rewarding. It is operating better if you are near the sea, of course, because of the salt water. But we found that it also works very well near a river, which is situated not far from the sea, but nevertheless runs not salt water, but sweet water. But this also gives it a little bit of impact. And yeah, we're still experimenting.
Mike and Adriana, what makes your 5 meter vertical multi-band? Does it have traps or matching stubs, or how do you make it multi-band?
Yes, the Rybakov antenna. Yes, it's a classical Rybakov, but a little bit shortened. It works up to the 20-meter bands, and I'm using 1 to 4 Anon at the bottom and 3 radials. It's quite like the longer version. I think the longer version is about 8 meters and a little bit longer radials. And this longer version is dedicated to work up until, I think, the 40-meter band. But the shortened one is even tunable for the 40-meter band. It's not so effective, but it works. And it's I have used a very small but effective antenna cable by DX wire. And this is, I think, also a version which you can put up outside if you have a small pole with you, and be prepared to fix it outside. It's quite well.
One of the questions that I was going to ask is, I always hear about the garden antennas that the UK guys are, they're always putting antennas in their garden. And I was wondering, this portable antenna stuff, as Mike and Adriana mentioned, has some applications there.
Yeah, very much so, Willie. I mean, one of the issues for us, of course, is that most of us don't have large gardens, and it's very common indeed to have quite small gardens, particularly the more modern houses that have been built, those built in the last 20, 25 years, have got standard, very small gardens, perhaps not as small as Mike and Adriana's, but, certainly no more than, 30 feet by 30 feet, maybe. That's the maximum amount of space. So we found different ways to do it, and Ken was saying earlier that if you can do putting up a pole to put up an inverted V is a very, very good way to go. One of the antennas that I've used a lot, and I've got two antennas at home that I work the world with. One is an inverted V off-center fed dipole. So that's the total length of that is the length of a dipole for 40 meters, 66 feet. So it goes up to the apex of my house, comes down on each side, and I use what's called DX wire, very, very thin wire, so it's virtually invisible. I managed to fit that in the space of my house without any problem at all. And that works on all bands from 40 meters to 6. You need an ATU for 15, but on 40, 20 and 10 meters, it's virtually resonant antenna, certainly SWR below 2:1. The commercial version of it is produced by Spiderbeam, and it's called the Aerial 51 antenna, if you've ever seen it. Rick, DJ0IP, who used to work for Spiderbeam, US amateur who lives in Germany now, he was the designer of the Aerial 51 antennas, and it's a very, very good antenna for limited space use and for multi-band use. I've used it on a campsite. I've used an inverted V antenna on a campsite pitch with a pole. I mean, it's okay, but the problem is, as soon as you've got wires coming down outside of where your tent is pitched, and then you're inevitably looking out for people who are going to trip over it as they walk past when it comes down to the ground. Or as I found on a French campsite last year, when people packed up their tents and left, they would rush out, the campsite owners would rush out with the big lawnmower and start mowing the grass furiously. And I was rushing out to retrieve the ends of my antenna before they got mowed up by this massive sit-on mower that they were using to cut the grass. So that is the only, I mean, that is the problem. And I find the problem with any antenna with a pole in the hills is finding something to attach it to. In the hills around where I live here, there is nothing. You're on the top of a hill or on the side of a hill. There's no trees. There's nothing to support a vertical antenna that you can, a vertical pole you can put in your rucksack. And I've had limited success with trying to support even a 6 or 7 meter, 18-foot pole on a very short stake, pushing it into the ground. It's very difficult to get that up and safely up. And again, you then need to guy it. And I think, as some of you were saying, and some of us have said, as soon as you get down to guying it, you're just spending a lot more time putting up those guy wires and putting them down into the ground and supporting the antenna. And personally, when I go out to work portable, I want to spend most of my time playing on the radio, not putting the station together. It's trying to find that sweet spot, the best way of doing it between what is going to work best and what is the easiest thing to put up, so I can play for as long as possible on the radio, for as long as possible, nice and simply. That's the problem, isn't it?
We live in an area where the ground generally tends to be fairly soft, unlike the rocks that you probably have. So we can use tent pegs and we just poke them into the ground, and we use link dipoles on a fishing pole vertical in the center. Creates a triangle which is stable. We don't tie it tightly, so the wind flops it about, no problem. High winds are no problem. Looks dramatic, but it doesn't do anything, and gets out perfectly well, and has a certain element of directionality if we want it. So that works for us.
I do have a few questions for the Rhode Island group. Have any of you tried the magnetic loop?
I think John Mills did, didn't he?
Yeah, I worked with John Mills a little bit with that particular antenna, and we made some contacts, but it seemed to be very finicky, you had to play with it to get it to work, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. But
if you check my stats out on POTA, you'd be shocked. I do great with it. Probably, I work primarily with the magnetic loop on 20 meters CW, primarily. More recently, because I have so many contacts, I have to try to get some new parks. I've started to do a little bit of FT8 and a little bit of SSB, but I'm primarily a CW operator, and I use that. I have moved, several years ago, I moved to a restricted area, so I'm limited on antennas. I also, on 40 meters, I don't know if you can see it or not, because it's pretty dark in here and I have it in the house right now. It's a Wolf River trap. That's the big one. And I use that on 40 meters. I put that outside. I keep it inside because it's a restricted area, so I keep it inside when I'm not using it. And I put it out during the daytime. And then I also use a 3 meter vertical. And you'd be shocked with an IC 705 and usually less than 10 watts or less usually, even though I will use a little more power occasionally. You'd be surprised at the number of parks that I've got, especially in the United States. But overseas,
what magnetic loop do you use?
The MFJ. What is it? 17 something it was. I've had it for several years now. That's the one I use. And the big problem that I had with it is because that big variable capacitor in the middle, if you change frequencies often, it sort of wears the connector out. So I usually now just leave that on 20 meters. I use that strictly for 20, and that's all I use on 20, and that's where most of my CW contacts are. So I do very well. It's about 1.5 years ago, I guess, I bought the 705, and of course, in the United States, there are so many parks. I still don't have Alaska or Hawaii, as a matter of fact, on 10 watts. And a matter of fact, I have a problem getting up into your area. This morning, I did work with a fellow in a park in Connecticut. But for some reason, I have problems in your area, but I go over you and then I get into Canada. And that's where I pick up recently, because of the time change here, that's where I get my night certificates into Canada. Say after...
Bob, we lost you there. You suddenly broke up. The signal broke up.
Yeah, I just got a notice across my screen to that effect. My internet is not stable. But that's a bit.
It's back working again fine now. Bob, just for the guys up in Newport County, just very roughly, just give them your stats on POTA at the moment.
I have 2,311 parks. I have 201 late shift QSOs, 1,317 early shift QSOs, 23 countries other than the United States. And most of that is with 10 watts or less. And like someone else mentioned earlier, I look at both reverse beacon and I'll look at PSK reporter to see where my signal is going. And if I see it going overseas, naturally I'm going to start looking for parks there.
Thanks very much, Bob. Yeah, I mean,
that's
I
about
think,
it from that. That's you're quite welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable what people can do with very limited resources. Let me just bring in, again, for the guys in Newport County, our member Jeff in Belgium, 08NT. Jeff, just describe to the guys in Newport County the size of the garden that you've got to put your antennas in at home.
Well, in fact, it's not a garden, it's a balcony. I'm living in an apartment and I have two balconies. Actually, I'm using mostly the balcony, which is directed to the west, actually to the States, more or less. And the antennas that I have is for HF, is mobile whips like the Ampros or like the MFJs, like you described. And just lately, a couple of years ago, I got another whip antenna, which is called the Outback 2012, which is an antenna of about 1.4 meter. That's the one with the lead and the two banana plugs that you have to put into the thing. And I think it works as good as the Ampros or the mobile whips. So for the moment, I'm working with that. And I think the great advantage of that antenna is that you actually could disguise this antenna into a flower pot or into a bird cage if you want to, if you need that. So that just let me thinking. So I worked with that on HF, mostly digital modes. I do a lot of RTTY. I do a lot of FT8, FT4, and I think 2 weeks ago I was in the CQ Worldwide VPX CW contest, and I worked over 100 QSOs from the east of the States to China. So and that all with 5 watts because I was within the 5 watt category. On digital, I'm working a maximum of 20 watts. That's really a maximum. And I'm also doing quite a lot of VHF and up work with a 5-element log periodic. Actually, this afternoon, we had a big opening here in Europe. This afternoon, I was able to work into Sicily and into Italy on 2 meters, on FT8, of course. And on 4 meters, I worked into Echo Alpha 9 and into 5 Bravo 4 with just 20 watts, into a V2000. The V2000 worked on 6 meters, but you can tune it with the IC7300 up to the 4 meter band. So it just works. So that's a little bit the story. One of the things I think which is quite important is the location. So I'm at the top floor. That's very important. I think when my wife and I decided to go to an apartment, I say, okay, on one condition, I want to have a top floor apartment. So that's how we went. So I'm on the top floor here of that apartment, and I have a clear view out of the surroundings here. So I think location, very important. Even if your antenna is not 100% perfect, or is a compromise antenna, I think your location is maybe more important than the kind of antenna that you were using. Just another point, I think maybe Ken, Echo Alpha 5, I would say, Echo Alpha 5, because he has a lot in Echo Alpha 5. I think, Ken, you should also try to highlight the fact that you are using a trolley and that you are using a ground tuning unit. The ground tuning unit. This is as an alternative to radios and things like that. So maybe Ken should try to tell a little bit more about that. Thank you.
Okay, Jeff, let me just come back on that one then. Yes. Right. if I put a mobile whip on top of the car, I've yet to try the ground tuning unit, but if I do, it'll be placed on the roof of the car with the shortest lead connected to the braiding of the coax. Mine's not 8 foot long because I wind myself a little coil to stop any common mode back into the radio while I'm in the car. Good point about the trolley. Right, on the trolley, I am using a ground tuning unit, so that is replacing the car. It's creating a ground plane for me. But the way it works is, right, I'm trying to get the best out of the quarter wave that I've got. The efficiency is important. Anyone can put a quarter wave vertical up 17 foot approximately for 20 meters. However, if your coax isn't working, if it's the wrong type, if you're not near the sea, you're not near salt water, you need radials out. You need to create your ground plane. I don't use any ground radials at all. What I do is use the trolley. The trolley becomes an earth bus, and it is capacitively coupled to ground, and it's capacitively coupled because I use rubber wheels and no part of the trolley is actually in direct contact with the ground. And just to make sure, I put a plastic sheet under, which is very, very thin, maybe only 1 millimeter or 2 thickness, just to cover any metal part of the trolley. And then what I do is I have, I use a commercial type of ground unit, but you can make them very easily. And in effect, all you're using is a series coupled coil and capacitor. And what's happening is the stray RF, and there is always going to be RF because of the power you're using, you're forcing it through the trolley using that little capacitor and coil so that you clip a ground connection to the trolley. And you may say, well, what happens if I touch the trolley while I'm transmitting? Because bearing in mind, I said that it's your earth bus. I have done it, and you have to be careful, because until you get full deflection on your meter of the ground current going through the trolley to ground, you can get a little bit of a burn off the trolley. But once you've done it and you've got maximum deflection, the current is going to ground, meaning that that quarter wave above has got a direct reflection of another quarter wave into the ground. Some people say, I've heard one well-known amateur say, all you've done is created a tuned circuit and you're cheating. And I said, why should I put radials out? It's time consuming. I'm doing it a smarter way. So it's smart working. It's more difficult on 40 meters. There are odd occasions when I've actually thrown a ground wire onto the ground at the side of the trolley. It can be looped, it can just be thrown out because you need to get connection to ground, and it's not always possible through the little coil and the little capacitor in the ground tuning unit. So you help it with a radial, but I have used it maybe once every year. I'm due back out there in about another 8 days' time, and I'm really looking forward to taking the trolley out on maybe a few occasions, but I will use the car and the mobile setup probably a little bit more. But thanks for that, Jeff. I should have mentioned that at the beginning. But you are right as well, location. If I can just say this, and I think Nick will bear me out on this, once you get away from civilization, whether it's near the sea, up a hill, on top of a mountain, your noise level drops dramatically. And it's normal to get S1 noise or sometimes no S meter reading at all on the radio. That's how quiet it is. Yeah. Anything else anyone wants to ask about that? Ask me in a bit. Back to you, Nick.
Ken, what physical size is the trolley? How large is it? And have you done anything at your home QTH to change the conductivity of the soil? You're muted.
You're on mute, Ken.
Yeah. At my home QTH in Sheffield here, I'm nowhere near the sea. I do take the trolley to the nearest salt water, which is what I call brackish water. It's a little bit of salt water, it's a little bit of fresh water, and it does enhance the signal. The trolley is approximately 3 feet high. You call them sack trolleys, I believe, or sack carts. They've got 2 wheels on them, and you carry bags of sand or something. So they're very good in that you attach all the equipment to the trolley, insulated from the trolley. So I use, what I use is a kitchen chopping board, which is usually plastic, and I measure it out, or I cut it with a saw so that I can clamp it onto the trolley, and I drill holes into the plastic boarding, and then use plastic wire ties, plastic ties for coupling wire together. And I very, very rarely drill into the trolley itself, apart from when I tap onto the trolley for the earth connection, and I always drill into it for a better connection. I suppose I could weld it, but I've no welding equipment either here or down in Echo Alpha 5.
I've just posted a picture, Willie, on the screen there of Ken's trolley down on the beach there in Spain. So it's what, as you said, I think you call it in the States a sack trolley, like you'd see porters using in a dock situation, unloading ships and taking gear across to lorry containers and so on, and just repurposing it to hold all these radios and the aerial up the side and the battery at the bottom. That's what he's doing.
Interesting. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else got any questions? Conscious that Jim and the others there from Newport County have spent nearly a couple of hours with us now, hour and a half. So fantastic to have you join us. But anyone else got any contributions they'd like to make to the guys out there in Newport County?
Nick, can I just...
Yeah, go on, Ken. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I know I keep coming in with things, but one of the very simplest antennas, and the antenna that lots of people use, is a 9-to-1 on. And there are literally thousands on the market. You can buy any one, a commercial one. You can make one anyway, as we all know. But a 9-to-1 with a piece of wire, you can make what's called the EARCHI antenna. That's EARCHI. It was designed by a guy in Hawaii, and the Hawaiian Radio Club make them for charity, I believe. The proceeds go to charity. But what it is basically a 30-foot piece of wire which you could suspend on a tree branch, even if it's only 20 foot high, and slope it gently to a 9-to-1, and you'll be amazed how well that would work. If anyone's not sure of it, look it up on the internet. Urchi antenna.
I think
that's the antenna I regularly use for my POTA activations.
There you go. Yeah.
I've changed the wire, but it's amazingly inexpensive too.
Absolutely. And the results are good or bad?
Excellent.
There you go.
Sorry, the spelling again, please.
Yeah, Stephen, go on.
The spelling again, please.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Ken, do you want to spell it out for Stephen?
Yeah, it's Echo Alpha Romeo Charlie Hotel India. Urchi.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, I think I think what you guys did in running your little competition to see which antenna performed best was fun, a lot of fun indeed, and I'm sure it gave all of you a lot of food for thought, because the obvious answer, of course, to what you did there was, and I think Ken said that earlier, you know, it will all depend on the HF conditions and your location. Which antenna was going to perform the best on the day as well, you know. So I'm sure that Delta Loop antenna that John K1 JSM put up, you know, operated very well as well. But you know, it is a bit of a monstrous beast to put up. And Hiroki, when he described it, he's put this antenna on the top of his car, a 20-meter Delta Loop like that on the top of his car. I mean, he made the point to us out in California that he had virtually no wind whatsoever. So there was no danger of it flying anywhere or falling off or anything or breaking anything. But you know, a wonderful antenna to use really, because you know, it does actually give, you know, considerable amounts of gain for what you're putting up there, and some directivity as well that perhaps we don't get with the other antennas. But then there's someone, I think, Willie, you said it, or Bob, I think you made the same comment. You know, if you want to work on 40 meters POTA or even 20 meters POTA in the US, you know, you don't particularly need a low angle of takeoff, which you'd use for working DX. If you want to work, you know, stations within a few hundred miles of you, you can't beat a horizontal antenna or a you know an inverted V antenna. I mean, I find that when I work POTA with that 17-foot pole, I can get a nice match with the coil on the bottom. I get a very nice match. I get a decent signal, but my signal report on HF on 40 meters is definitely lower than it was when I was working on 20 meters, for example, because, you know, I'm working stations which are 100 miles away, 150 miles, 200 miles away, and my signal strength is definitely down for them. I don't have the punch that I probably would have if I put up an inverted V for 40 meters, for example, or even an end-fed half wave. But you know, end-fed half waves and inverted Vs and so on all need something to support the aerial at the top. And if there's not a single tree anywhere around you, you're going to struggle unless you can put up a pole. And then you've got to get a pole and you've got to get it supported and get it up and so on. So that's where we all end up using, you know, the simplest antenna. And Martin M1MRB made that point. You know, if you're going out in the car somewhere, in many ways you can't beat sticking, you know, a magnetic base on top of the roof and screwing an antenna into it and using that. You know, you'll get magnificent results from it on a decent day, won't you? As your shootout proved, you know, the antenna on the car performed as well as anything else, didn't it?
Nick, if you work from a windy hill, have you ever tried a kite up there?
I have. One of the problems we've got with kites, and particularly in hills around here, Henry, in the Pennines, is that wind direction changes very quickly. So I found that guying my vertical antenna. I've got 3 bits of small guy wire coming down to support the vertical antenna, but I get it vertical, and then suddenly the wind will change direction completely. 90, 180 degrees change, and the antenna starts to move in a completely different direction. So where I've pegged out the guy wires is not the right place. And in the end, I think you made that point with using a fiberglass pole and using that to support an inverted V antenna or a dipole antenna. In the end, you just have to say the wind's bending it like this all the time. The chances are it's not going to break and it's not going to snap. And anyway, if it does, there's anywhere near where I am sitting here out on this hill. If it breaks, it breaks. It won't be the end of the world. I won't be too upset. And even that steel telescopic whip, I've had it bent over almost like that, and then bend back the other way and back over again, and it still works perfectly. It hasn't done it any harm at all. Not in the highest winds, I'll grant you that, but in the normal winds that we get here in the hills, gusts of wind of 20, 30 miles an hour, it will cope with that. Once the winds go above that, you've got a problem. But then you've got a problem with any antenna if you're operating portable in those conditions, is the truth of it.
Ken, I'd like to ask a question. I see, I never hear people out using vertical dipoles. Does anybody here use them or had any experience? Or because my shootout antenna I thought would be, would work well, and I think it did, but I don't see anybody using them.
Yeah, I think a number of us have used them, Willie. And in fact, of course, you've got a guy in the States, I've forgotten his call sign for a second. He's just produced a book, hasn't he? He produces millions of videos of his exploits with a vertical dipole on HF. What's it? Someone tell me, Ken, what's his call sign? The guy in the States.
A4 OGO.
Sorry?
A4 OGO.
OGO, that's right, yeah.
Salty Walt.
Salty Walt. Salty Walt's just produced a book. I saw it in the latest edition of QST about antennas. Yeah, I've used a vertical dipole. In fact, not last year, the year before last, I was on a campsite in France, and I used my 12-meter SOTA beam pole, and I supported my 20-meter vertical antenna on that pole. I used the vertical antenna, which is, the one they call the flower pot. So you piece of coax, halfway up, you strip the outer bit of the coax, you take the top bit of the coax up, the bottom bit is the shielded part running down to the bottom. You wire a coil down the bottom, so you've got a bit of a ballon at the bottom, coax back. It works extremely well. And Ken was out in Spain working into a bit of a pile up in VK, and I told him I was there, called him, and he heard me, and I then worked all the VK stations using 10 watts only to that vertical antenna supported from a pole. So yeah, they do work very well, but the problem with them is that they're single band antennas, of course. So if you go on 20 meters and you've taken the antenna for 20 meters and conditions just aren't working on 20 meters, and you want to go on 30 or 40 or 15 or 10 or something like that, where conditions might be better, then unless you've bought up a great pile of those antennas, you can't really use that as a multi-band antenna, can you? The vertical dipole. But no, it's a great antenna. It does work well. I'm not certain it works better than a good quarter wave antenna with either radials or counterpoise wires, but it's decent.
What I would say there, Nick, is if you're going to go QRP, so you don't need the heaviest of heavy duty SWG wire. You could use the thinnest of wire, and all you will really need is a dipole centerpiece, which are probably what, £1, £2.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you could actually take monobanders up with you. So, yeah, I mean, you're never going to put a vertical dipole up for 40 meters because you'd have to be 66 foot tall to get it up to a tree branch. It's just impossible. I don't know anyone who can throw any higher than about 30 to 40 foot unless you use some implement. So if you're going to use a vertical dipole, it's got to be 10 to 20 meters. And the beauty about the dipole, like you said, Nick, is firstly it's vertically polarized, and what better antenna to have? It's going to be generally a quiet antenna. It's a monoband antenna, and well, I wish one of you guys over there could ship me something without charges. I'd buy an Evolution antenna by Tom, who made Sigma antennas on Force 12. And he's brought one out, which is a 2-element vertical dipole, true vertical dipole. His call sign's November 6th, Bravo Tango. I wish I could buy one. They're $800, but by the time I've got the charges on top, it cost me $2,000. But he's got one that will work on all 5 bands, and it's only 17 feet high. Fantastic.
We've used them, but as Jeff said, depends on the location. In our case, it was the 3rd floor of a house. The vertical bit went upwards from there, and the other half was simply dropped out the window. So that worked. And that you would get the similar sort of context if you're near a cliff. That would do it too. So that worked for us, and I'm never much for QRO, QRP most of the time. QRO for me is about 30 watts, 40 watts.
There's another vertical dipole that's available on the market, which is a 5-bander, and it's produced by a company now they've just gone out of, well, I say just, a couple of years ago, gone out of production, and they were called Trans World antennas. And they're now marketed by DX Engineering. And they are, I think they go under the title of vertical dipoles, but they're based on exactly the same antenna as the Sigma 5. We can get them in the UK, but to get one that's the 5-bander is nearly £700, which is probably $1,000 American dollars or more.
Yeah, I've a bit like Ken and I talked about this a few months ago, Willie, about those Trans World antennas that are advertised on DX Engineering. You know, nice antenna, they will ship internationally, but it just does make it a very expensive purchase over here in the UK. It's not cheap.
Yeah, I like antennas that I can build for a couple of dollars.
Yeah, me too.
Well,
all mine are built by myself, Willie. I've not paid for any of them, but you know, we dream about these things. But that's one of the beauties, I think, of antennas, isn't it? Is that we can make these things where we would struggle to make ourselves a radio as good as, you know, what ICOM and Yaesu and Kenwood can produce. You know, even the best engineering and skills in the world, you would have to be right at the top end of the skill set to make a radio that was as good as those radios. But antennas, we can all buy bits of wire, and we can buy fiberglass poles, and we can make virtually anything, can't we? And that's why we find these kind of talks quite inspiring. You know, when Hiroki came and gave us his talk on his 20-meter portable delta loop, it was quite inspiring because it inspired a number of us to go off and say, actually, I'm going to go and build a version of that for myself as well. Spend virtually no money on it, you know, just the bits I've got at home here and the bits of wire I've got and the bits I've spent very little money on, and see what I can do with it. And when I built my 10-meter version of that inverted with the apex down delta loop antenna, and I was transmitting on 10 meters, I was obviously on CW, and I was looking at the reverse beacon network to see where my signals were going, and what I was hearing on it as well. And unfortunately, it was a couple of weeks ago when I last tried it in the back garden, and it coincided with one of the awful, lovely, you know, CME events we've had where there was virtually no propagation at all on 10 meters. But I still got into about 15 countries. I had about, you know, 60 or 70 hits on the reverse beacon network. So I was getting all over Europe. I heard and failed to get him 9J2BO in South Africa, or in the southern part of Africa rather. He suddenly came out of nowhere, 5 and 8, 5 and 9 suddenly. So there was obviously some propagation, you know, very sporadic propagation on 10 meters in that direction. So I'm waiting for the opportunity to go and try it out in the field. Rob, KB1ZZU. Oh, is that goodbye? I thought you had. I thought Rob put his hand up to say something.
I had a message from Rob that he'd got an early call for dinner for supper, and he was heading out. As a matter of fact, I'm going to have to sign off too.
Yeah,
Nick, it's been fantastic. I really enjoyed this. You've expanded our horizons on you know, the conversation about antennas and whatever. It's been really amazing.
Willie, thank you very much. And before you disappear, let me just say to you on behalf of Pennine Amateur Radio Club, because we'll have lots of people looking at the video of this in the coming weeks. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's been great fun. Lovely to meet you guys. The only thing I'd say to you is we ought to try and find a way of keeping in touch when either of our clubs or members in our clubs are going out doing some portable operation somewhere, so that, you know, when Ken's out there in Alicante in the salt lagoons in a couple of weeks' time, you know, for us to be able to tell you he's going to be probably out from, you know, 0600 UTC until whenever, probably starting on 20 meters. We ought to try and find a way of involving you guys to come and find us when we're operating portable, and equally for our members here, we do it between ourselves. So we'll just leave that thought with you before you go. But thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's been great fun, and really enjoyed it.
One of the things that I've done is I've written down all the call signs of you guys that have been on here. And I'm going to look through my logs and see how many I've worked before.
Yeah. Nick, very quickly.
Yeah.
Sorry to bother you. I've had reasonable success with off-center dipoles, but if you're, I'm going to mention a website that's well worth a look. I'm sure our American friends won't have heard of it, but most in the UK might have done. The Royal Signals Amateur Radio Society. If you check their website out, they've got a number of very, very professionally done, documented how to build antennas, how to build coils and inductors and all those sort of things. So the Royal Signals website, phenomenal, useful piece of information if you're building stuff, and the quality of their downloads are unbelievable. And on that note, I'll leave it to you, Dick.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Yeah, and also again for you guys out there in Rhode Island, have a look at the website of Rick, DJ0IP, DJ0IP.com. He's got an amazing website showing you, you know, how to build a decent balun, how to build a decent common mode choke, lengths of wires for antennas and so on. Rick is, that website of Rick's is also excellent, but Martin is quite right. The Raw Signals Amateur Radio Society, on their website, they've got a whole section called antennas and technical documents. If you go down there, virtually every antenna that we've talked about here tonight is referenced on that website in quite a lot of detail.
Well,
so on that note, can we first of all, for those of us left in the club here with the guys here for Newport County, can we show our appreciation to the guys for Newport County for joining us today? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our pleasure.
you very
Our
much.
pleasure. Thank you for having us.
No, it's been a pleasure to meet you all. 73 to you all.
I'll just say one thing in passing. From 1400 Zulu to 1800 Zulu on June 8th. So that'll be a Sunday in just a few days. Probably 4 to a dozen Newport County Radio Club people will be activating the Fort Adams State Park. So you'll find us on CW sideband digital modes, but 1400 Zulu to 1800 Zulu on the 8th.
Brilliant. Lovely. Thank you very much, Bob.
All right. You guys have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
the.
Cheers.